Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say before I start another massive well done to all of you. It takes so much courage to come up here and talk about something that you're passionate about, and you all did a phenomenal job, so well done. So today I'm going to talk to you about my experience with an articulation competition and the wonderful opportunities that have arisen for me as part of being part of the alumni network. So firstly, the question can be, how did I hear about articulation? So I was first introduced to the prize in 2019 when I was all the way back in year 12. My school offered it as a public speaking competition where we got to talk about a piece of art for 10 minutes. I love public speaking, and I really wanted to push myself out of my comfort zone, but my first thought was, who on earth is going to talk about art for 10 minutes? Like, what could there possibly be to say for more than 10 minutes? But I was soon come to realise how incorrect I was. So at the time, I was studying classical civilization A-level, and one of our units was Greek art. Now, I was and always have been extremely fascinated by the ancient world, and learning about this part of antiquity within this was exciting and extremely enlightening. We looked at a range in Greek art, from sculpture to architecture and pottery. And I've always loved everything to do with classical sculpture, as I feel like it's one of those art forms that has truly transcended the test of time, as we can see with Thomas's speak on Michelangelo. However, one piece of artwork in particular really caught my attention. This is called Ajax and Achilles Play Dice. And at first, I was struck simply by how beautiful and intricate the scene was. And when we started learning about the context and the characters a bit more, I immediately entered the internal heat of the competition and realised that this is how you talk about art for 10 minutes. So, working towards the competition, we did internal heats at my school, and I was chosen to advance onto my regional round, which was at the V&A Museum. I gave my presentation on the vase, which involved critically analysing it, which was an extremely rewarding experience. Once I understood the very simple and overarching message of the scene, I felt that everywhere I looked, there was a new intricate detail that I'd not noticed before, but was very important in portraying the message that I felt that the artist was trying to tell. Now, forgive me as I relive my glory days and indulge in giving you a bit of my speech at the time. So this is the vase that talked about Ajax and Achilles Play Dice. Now, it is an ancient Greek Attic black figure storage amphora by Exekias entitled Ajax and Achilles Play Dice. And Exekias was an ancient Greek vase painter and potter who was active in Athens between roughly 545 BC and 530 BC. Now, before I go over some key parts of the artwork, I'd just like to give you a little bit of context, as knowledge of that is important for the scene depicted. Ajax and Achilles were Greek soldiers who fought in the infamous Trojan War, which was a 10-year-long siege of Troy. Both men were great Greek heroes who were prominent in ancient literature due to the huge part that they played in the war, and Achilles often known as the greatest of all soldiers. However, differently, and what drew me to this piece, was that this scene shows a different part of the war, not the general fighting and calamity that one would be used to, but a scene of more serenity. Now we know that, we're going to take a closer look at the scene of the vase. So Achilles is on the left saying 4, whereas Ajax is on the right saying 3. And so we know immediately that Achilles is winning the game 4-3. Now, it might be seen as a simple score, but it is a metaphor for a lot more. Now, due to our knowledge that Ajax is losing, upon close inspection, his body language portrays how he's feeling in comparison to Achilles. And if we begin to look at the slight differences in the two men's body language, it's clear to see that Ajax is more concentrated and invested in the game. Now, the first thing I noticed was their spears. Achilles is holding his spear loosely. You can see the way the points are separated at the top, which means that they are not parallel to each other. But Ajax, his spears are held in a more parallel way, showing that they are actually being clenched in his fists, which is sort of a sign of a mental resolve as he is losing. Now, another smaller detail is their eyebrows. If you look at Achilles, he has a single line for his eyebrows, whereas Ajax has a double line, which is again a subtle clue that there's a little bit of tension and our losing character is far more stressed. And finally, another subtle detail is their feet. If you look at their feet, Achilles is relaxed. His feet is on the ground, But Ajax's heel is picked up ever so slightly, as you can see a little bit of light underneath his foot. This shows that his calf is engaged, his muscles are tensed, and his body is overall tenser. Yeah, so that's a little bit of my speech. Go back. So what has this experience taught me? Well, firstly, it taught me that you can talk for 12 minutes, not 10 minutes about art. Ran over a lot, got in trouble for that, that's okay. But all jokes aside, it was an extremely rewarding experience that sparked a new love of art of all kinds in me. The sort of thought and analysis that goes into analysing such artwork is something that you can utilise in all walks of life. I'm currently studying law, and such thought is not as different to art as one might think. It's also encouraged me to realise that such engagement with art is not something that I wanted to confine to a singular style of art or a singular experience, which is where the amazing alumni network comes into the picture. So the alumni network, as suggested by the name, is once you complete the prize, you become part of the Articulation alumni. Now, when I first finished, I wasn't quite sure what this meant or entailed. I just remember getting lots of emails from Tim and being extremely confused as to what he wanted. But as a small overview, it's just a way to get involved with lots more things and opportunities that Articulation has to offer. For example, as I'll go on to sort of discuss, the chances that follow are opportunities to meet different people with similar interests and give your presentation in front of different audiences and other presentations. There's also a few paid opportunities as well that are part of the network. So my first opportunity as part of the network was giving my talk on the vase at a lunchtime session of the Ways of Seeing conference. These were during COVID times, so I had to do a couple of Zoom calls for these. It was really interesting because I got the opportunity to talk in front of a different audience, and it's an entirely different experience, as there's no nerves as there might be today. You're sort of just giving a talk about something that you love in front of people that also would find it interesting. My next experience was the following year for Art Fringe Cambridgeshire. This was a fundraising event to raise money for Articulation, and this again was an experience of me giving my talk on Exekias' vase. However, I had the absolute pleasure this time round of hearing from Professor Craig Clowness, who talked about modern art in China. This was incredibly interesting, as it's one of those unique opportunities it's one of those unique opportunities you get to hear from someone who is an expert and so knowledgeable in their field that you otherwise would not have had the opportunity to hear from. And it's just one example of the kind of incredible people that you can work with as part of the network. However, though these were two really enjoyable experiences, they did just consist about me talking of a piece of art that, although I loved, I felt like I already knew everything there was to know about. I was very keen to widen my artistic horizons, particularly because I do not study, nor have had the opportunity really to study or immerse myself in things to do with art and art history. It's due to this that I was extremely excited with my most recent venture with the Alumni Network. So last summer, I was lucky enough to be invited to engage in a panel discussion with Tim and Fiona Alderton at the National Gallery, which is just one of the few of many paid professional opportunities that the network can encourage. We discussed the artist Peter Paul Rubens and his portrayal of the female form in his paintings. We focused particularly on his pieces Samson and Delilah, Minerva, Peace and War, and Moses and the Brazen Serpent. The preparation involved was one of my favourite parts of the process. We did readings, and then we had calls to discuss our thoughts in them and the perspective pieces that we were focusing on. The readings were admittedly challenging for me at times, as this isn't a way that I had not had to think in or engage in for a long time. However, they were a brilliant foundation to begin my knowledge and the way I thought about Rubens's portrayal of women, and his depiction of the female nude especially. The calls that followed were extremely fun and very insightful, as we all got an opportunity to get started on our debates, and I love debating. It was not only us discussing our readings, but also bouncing ideas off of one another, and all of these varying, unique and different perspectives really helped bolster the experience. This also made me feel far more comfortable about talking about things other than a classical vase. My fellow panellists were art historians, so I was worried about my ideas being ever so slightly useless. However, something that I did find particularly interesting is that although we weren't talking directly about a classical piece, my background of studying art, classical art and classical works did give me a unique insight, particularly seeing as Rubens himself was fond of the ancient world and took a lot of his inspiration from it. So, for example, Minerva is an ancient Roman goddess. So I immediately went into this experience from the critical viewpoint of knowing what Minerva is normally depicted like, what she is described like in literature, and then went into it with that sort of unique perspective. And through this, we are able to compare and contrast how Rubens chose to portray her versus how she can normally be portrayed. Furthermore, some of the discussions we had around more intricate pieces involved in the art, such as the drapery we can see in Samson and Delilah here, were important ones that I had honed in my time studying art, which was an important aspect of all classical sculpture and art. Therefore, further connections were appreciated and spotted between the two. All of this to show that getting involved in the alumni network really widens your horizons and the opportunities if you're looking for new ways to appreciate art and artists. After our panel, we engaged in a short debate, which Tim and I won. So Fiona won't be happy to hear that, but we won, I'm sure, yeah. And we opened the floor to questions in the audience, of which there was roughly over 100 people who had come to watch. And a lot of them knew about art themselves, so though scary, because some of them did put me on the spot a bit, it was really interesting, and it was rewarding to be able to answer these questions under what felt like a lot of pressure at the time. But it was fun. So what have all of these taught to me about art? Well, it's reaffirmed to me that art is not merely about aesthetics, but a powerful medium for storytelling, cultural reflection, personal expression. The messages that I've learned to decipher from seemingly simple works of art, and all types of art, have applied to all walks of art and is something that I have not thought of or realised before. And about myself, I learned that art is fun. It's really interesting to find more ways to engage with it and nurture this sort of hobby of mine, especially since I don't get to study it. Also, the knowledge that I had of classics was helpful and is not something for anyone, any ideas that you have or things that you might not feel relate to art. It's all relevant in your interpretation of artwork and is something that I learned. And about the world around me, also really shaped the way that I look at the world. There's so much gorgeous artwork everywhere we go, and like I said, artwork transcends the tests of time. So encouraging yourself and myself to walk around with the eye of an amateur art historian makes everything more beautiful. So thank you for listening, and I'd like to say congratulations again. And even if you don't win, which I didn't, Tim will have words, I can't encourage you to still get involved with the network and grab all the opportunities that they have to offer. Thank you.